This Fed Gov Today program is sponsored by IBM. On this edition of Fed Gov Today with Francis Rose, an acquisition revamp at the Pentagon, an AI jumpstart for your agency's reopening efforts, and the tech turbocharge that's coming after the shutdown. Welcome to Fed Gov Today with Francis Rose. Several acquisition units at the Pentagon are getting new names and new missions. The new acquisition transformation strategy says the department will, quote, prioritize three overarching outcomes for a transformed acquisition system. Nick Guertin's former Assistant Secretary for Research, Development, and Acquisition for the Navy. He's founder of Guertin Transformation Associates. Nick, welcome. It's great to have you on the program. Secretary Hegseth rolled this out Friday before last. A lot of changes here potentially, and you wrote recently on LinkedIn, this is full of initiatives that could have substantial positive impact on defense acquisition outcomes. What did you see here that you like for getting better outcomes in the department?
Well, Francis, first of all, thanks very much for having me on the show. I saw a lot of things that I strongly thought was positive, and when I read them all in this very thick number of activities and transformation efforts, I saw some of my favorite things in there, actually. I've always been a big fan of modular open systems and competition and understanding business models and intellectual property strategies. It was just some tremendous positive movement in there. There's a lot of things in there that I think will be hard to pull off in a relatively short period of time. But I applaud the effort of leading boldly and trying to take charge of something that has really needed this kind of fresh breath to move the department forward in what I think will end up being a very positive way.
There are two things that, as Secretary Hegseth laid them out in his speech, I thought of you. One of them was modular open systems, because you and I have talked about that for at least 15 years. And the second one was moving from a list of requirements to problem statements. That's something that you advocated when you were in the Navy just this last time. What will it take, in your view, to move from where the services are now in the Pentagon as a whole to that concept of problem statements that industry people can then respond to in whatever way they see fit?
I'm enthusiastic about that as a leverage for transformation. When I was the Director for Operational Test and Evaluation, one of the things I put in place was a strategy centered around the idea that software-reliant systems are going to change over time. They have to. But at the time, that organization wasn't centered around this idea of incremental improvement as a part of a life cycle strategy. So one of the things we can get out of having a different way of looking at requirements through that lens will be what does good enough to start look like, and how do we get to like an 80% solution, or what the software folks call a minimum viable product, and then iterate from there. Now, one of the cautions I will say is that there's kind of two ways of looking at the world with some Venn diagram in between, that some of the things that will just require a lot of heavy metal, like, ships and airplanes and submarines, it takes a while to build those things. It takes a while to get the requirements for them right, to the point where you're building a safe vessel that's got the right stealth or flight characteristics or whatever it is. Those are not things that you just decide and then iterate on later. But all the mission systems, all these complex software things that go into those platforms, those weapons of war, those can be under more of a constant change rubric. And if you understand what the general warfighting capability problem set is, you can figure out what are the highest priority things to trade off and interact regularly with the user and be more agile, little a agile, in how we field that capability.
One of the renaming and reframing elements that I talked about in the introduction to this segment is a move from program executive offices to a portfolio management approach. You write on LinkedIn that you like that idea too. What's the difference in that shift? Why do you like it? And what is the better result that the warfighter will get as a result of that?
With a caution that it remains to be seen, because we've gone from an objective to now implementation. Michael Duffy, Undersecretary for Acquisition and Sustainment, he's got to work with the services to figure out exactly how that plays out. But at the core of it is the idea that the portfolio acquisition executive will have an ability to do trades across the programs under his charge. And that will require a lot of interaction with Congress, by the way. They'll have a say in how the money gets spent. But the idea of breaking out of the idea of a program of record as a kind of a whole entity funded all to itself, but that it could be traded off with other things that will do similar work or that have a more profound impact, and have that trade space decision making down to a lower level means that we'll potentially get much more impactful products in a shorter period of time.
What's the potential for any of these initiatives, either the ones that we've talked about or ones that we haven't, because there's a lot here, as you said. What's the potential for some of these to go sideways, and what would prevent, what action should leaders take to make sure that those things don't go sideways, Nick?
So having been in the business of transforming organizations and implementing those kinds of strategies, working with the people who will actually do the work, valuing their input, considering their professional wisdom, and bringing that into play as they move forward with a lot of this, big muscle movement, will be critically important to success. They need to bring the team along as they become a part of living their lives in a different way.
Secretary Hegseth laid out some pretty aggressive timelines for the first steps of this transformation. Does that mean that there will also be a pretty aggressive timeline for people to be able to see if these moves are having the intended effect, or is that a longer tail, do you think?
Well, I think some things will take less time to put in place, and others will require a more thoughtful strategy. I think Michael Duffy had some press recently where he talked about it's really about cost. No, sorry, I'm getting that right. I started talking about the old day, cost, schedule, performance. He's trying to reorder that to schedule performance cost, I think.
You wrote schedule modular on LinkedIn.
Well, that was what I had a friend that said, well, they're taking the iron triangle and they're collapsing it. Well, what would they collapse it to? Schedule and how do we position ourselves to improve over time? That kind of thing takes malice aforethought. You have to think about how to architect a system, how to architect even the craft to be able to take swap outs of functionality as a part of a life cycle choice. That means some of that upfront decision making will take a little bit longer than some people might want if they want immediate results. They might have to be a little patient, especially for brand new systems, to think that through up front before fully committing to an implementation, knowing that you're going to be much more fluid and flexible as a part of that longer life cycle.
Final thought, what will the workforce need? What skills, what capacity and so on that it doesn't have now, or maybe doesn't have enough of now, Nick?
Right, so I think that as we lean forward into digital engineering, using different kinds of tools, different kinds of modeling, I'm a particular big fan of things like digital twins, and even in physical things, the government people will need to understand how they're buying these things. They'll need different tools for that. They'll need to interact more thoughtfully with industry. They'll need to interact more deeply with the users, with the operators, and that three-party conversation around how do we improve over time will need a different kinds of interaction mechanism and more robust tooling in order to support those outcomes.
How will you know a year from now or 2 years from 5 years from now that this turned out the way that the Secretary and his team intended it?
Wow, that's a great question. I haven't thought that one through. I would say that sometimes you can measure the success of a transformation effort on joy. How happy are people with the work that they're doing? How committed are they? Well, everybody in this acquisition system is committed, but are they having any fun doing it? Do they feel personally connected in the work? And I think that will be, maybe that's not a great specific metric, something you can put on a wall chart, but that's what I'll be looking for.
Nick, it's great to have you back on the program. Thanks for joining me today.
My pleasure. Thank you again.
You can read more about the Pentagon's acquisition reform effort on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. Up next, an AI jumpstart for your agency's reopening efforts. Fed Gov Today with Francis Rose continues in a moment.
How do we solve our nation's biggest challenges? Precision, speed, honor. No manual, no roadmap, no problem. Launching AI in orbit, using XR on the battlefield. Stopping fentanyl at the border, making America stronger, safer, faster. It's who we are and how we lead. Booz Allen, it's in our code.
You used a term a moment ago that I think makes some people skittish, and that is AI improving itself. What's the state of the art when it comes to that, and what might be able to be done to make people less skittish about that concept?
Well, that is the frontier of AI. I think a lot of what we're talking about in AI today is truly automation. When we talk about even how the Department of War is using AI today is for automating workflows. They're testing inputs, getting known outputs. That's not artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is when you get that probabilistic output, and we want to preserve that. So I just think that's where the technology is going.
Welcome back. Federal government leaders say the end of the shutdown means the beginning of a long game of catch-up. Some agencies have a head start on that game, though. Terry Halverson's Vice President of Federal Client Development for IBM. He's former Chief Information Officer of the Department of Defense. Terry, welcome. Thanks for joining me. A lot of agencies have already deployed artificial intelligence solutions. How is that going to give them a leg up when they try to get back to normal as quickly as possible?
Yeah, well, first, Francis, thank you for having me on again. Always a pleasure to be here. AI is going to let them look at their data much faster. While I don't like to say AI is replacing people, it does let people do more work faster. I think that's what's going to be the biggest advantage to the agencies that have it. They're going to be able to go through their data, they're going to be able to go through their backlogs quicker, they'll be able to do quicker analysis, and I think get to decisions faster. AI today can really tee up decisions much faster if the data you're using is ready. I think the challenge for the government will be, as it always is, making sure that the data is ready to go.
You wrote about that recently. You wrote government data is often richer and more structured than corporate data, but it's not always AI ready. Where does it fall short in your view in the experience that you've seen?
A couple things. I think it's not structured maybe as well, and there's so much data. When you want to really do AI well, you really want to curate the smallest data set possible to get the AI. And I think a lot of times in government, we just think, okay, we'll just use the really big data sets, and that will get us the answer. And it'll get you one, but it maybe not as specific as you want, and maybe not as fast as you want. So I think they're going to look at how they curate that data and how they really ensure the complete quality of the data, between the accuracy of the data, the way it's architected, all of those things, because the federal government has more data than anybody. It's the volume and scale is what really gets people hard to understand, and I think that will be the biggest challenge.
You pointed out before we went on the air a calendar challenge that the federal government's up against as a result of the shutdown. And you made a good point I hadn't thought of. We're only about 2 weeks from Thanksgiving. We're only about 6 weeks from the end of the calendar year when a lot of folks take extended breaks. What's the implication of that for trying to get back on track after the shutdown?
I think it's going to be really hard. I mean, the people will work hard, AI will help them, but I think we've just compressed this into, as you just talked about, a 6-week period where a lot of people will take leave, people are going to be traveling. It's going to complicate this more than it would have, say, if it was at the beginning of October or if it was after the first of the year.
Mm-hmm. What are the steps that you'd like to see leaders take now to be able to mitigate the difficulty as much as possible?
I think the first thing they've got to do is, and hopefully some of them, and I know from talking to them, some have already been working on this and thinking about it even while the shutdown was going on, is getting to that data sources that you want and starting to figure out how do I you really curate that data? How do I run analytic tools on the data to get it ready to be in a format that allows AI to do its job well?
Mm-hmm. You pointed out too, when we were talking earlier, that it's one thing to look at AI and how it will help you now, but there's another idea, which is to tee it up for long-term productivity gains. Is it tempting in the wake of something like a shutdown to think, I just got to keep the trains running on time, not think about long-term?
And I think we're all guilty of that. And I think that will be one of the things that the government will have to, and the data scientists will have to kind of fight their way through, like, let's just not clear the decks so we can, till Christmas. But how do we think about this in a longer way? How do we really think about it in a systematic way and force themselves to do that? And that gets hard during the Christmas holidays period. Now coming off of a shutdown, it'll just be something they'll have to keep in mind, and I think they probably will.
What's the horizon that people should be thinking about timeline-wise to try to get back to normal, to try to lay the foundation for some of the things that you've just described? Is it a 6-month calendar? Is it a year-long calendar?
I think it's a 6 month to a year calendar, and I think I would really divide kind of my data up. Like, okay, here are some things that probably 6 months is when I want to get some solutions done, and here is that beyond a year. I would divide it that way, and I think that works well. It particularly works well inside government to do it that way.
Terry, it's always great to have you on the program.
Same here. Good to see you.
You can read more about what's ahead for reopening the government on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. Up next, the tech turbocharge that's coming after the shutdown. Fed Gov Today with Francis Rose will be right back.
And that's why it's part of your enterprise risk management program, because you may already be doing particular risk management activities in your cyber or other, privacy, other areas. And so you don't want to duplicate that in AI. You may be able to leverage that. And so having people from these other domains, whether they're privacy or cybersecurity or safety or whoever it happens to be, that are already in that mature enterprise risk management function, advising the AI team as they're coming in, hey, we have these artifacts that you need. That's the kind of communication, that you want to have.
Understanding, what the risks are that are out there and having a single pane of glass to do that, so you can see the risks that are out there. You can see kind of all of your AI tools, all of the use cases that you're using for, and then, like we talked about before, it's really the outcomes, right? And how are we measuring those outcomes? And, that's where, it's really key that we're measuring that. And it's like, are you getting what you expected out of all these different AI tools and all these different AI use cases, so that we don't have to look back and say, we spent all this money, we did all this, and we didn't get the value.
AI will present its own challenges with becoming secure, but we are already seeing industry adapt alongside that. Some of the companies that we're bringing on to Carahsoft are solving that problem today, identifying the AI-generated code, being able to sign off on that code and allow that code to be inserted into an application very quickly and securely. So AI is the gas pedal, security is the brake a little bit, but security is keeping up very quickly with the adoption of AI.
Welcome back. The government reopening after the longest shutdown in history could reveal some surprises for technology leaders, according to former government guests on recent Fed Gov Today podcasts. The reopening, though, could be an opportunity for those tech leaders, too. Gary Washington's former CIO at USDA. He's the new Chief Strategy Officer at ACT-IAC. Gary, welcome. It's great to have you back on the program. Do you see an opportunity for technology people as they get back to the office, as they get their teams back to the office after the shutdown, to make gains and not just play catch up?
Absolutely. I think IT leaders and professionals have to think differently about IT delivery, given the priority around AI, artificial intelligence, consolidating data, If you overlay that with cybersecurity and getting rid of the technical debt, the legacy systems that we have, I think there'll be some tremendous opportunities to learn, some tremendous opportunities to move the federal government forward in terms of modernizing service delivery, and in terms of getting costs down, or what we spend on IT as a whole. So it's going to be an intense journey for a lot of people because there's not a lot of time, and there's a very ambitious agenda around information technology for this administration.
What is the best way to attack that agenda and to demonstrate not just to your peers and to those below you, but to the people above you, we're taking this seriously, we're tackling it, and we're making progress?
I think you need to be very focused, and you need to be very focused on the priorities and not diverge off and do some things that feel nice to you, because there's a lot going on. And just remain focused on that over a period of time and make sure that everybody's aligned. Not just the technology folks, but your business partners as well in your organizations.
How do you identify the most important business partners? Because there's a lot of people vying for the attention of the chief information officer. I imagine that will be intensified after the shutdown based on whatever's gone on in the last 40-some days till people actually get back to the office. How do you identify which of those relationships get your attention first?
Well, I believe that tone is set by the secretary and the deputy secretary, and they have priorities across the department, and they have some ideas about what they want modernized and what they want to see improved. And I think making sure that you have a strategy that they agree with and that they buy into, and you make sure that that's communicated across the enterprise is very important.
You said think differently. How would you like to see your peers as CIOs think differently moving forward than they have in the past? What does that revolve around in your view, Gary?
Well, in terms of thinking differently, the career CIOs, I would use this as an opportunity to do what we've been wanting to do for many, many years. Transform, modernize, have some value added in terms of mission delivery across different organizations, getting the technical debt issue solved as well. So, but it's going to be an intense journey. In the political CIOs, I would embrace the career employees and bring them along for this journey and make sure that they have a part to play and have some ownership in making sure that this transformation takes place.
You talked about technical debt now. You mentioned it twice, so
Yes.
It's obviously something that's very near and dear to your heart.
Yeah.
What have been the most successful techniques to eliminate it that you've seen?
Well, from my experience at USDA, we had a very old network, and it was architected during that time, but for current times, it wasn't fitting the purpose. So we were able to consolidate 17 networks down to one. And over a period of time, over a 10-year period, USDA will see a $700 million cost avoidance. We're getting rid of that old equipment and making sure that we have a state-of-the-art modern network by virtue of the EIS contract with GSA. And there's other things such as consolidating your data centers, moving your applications to the cloud. And we've been very successful in that. But I think the focus with the new CIO at USDA right now is really on the mission systems and mission delivery, which, quite frankly, the old systems cost a lot of money, and they're inefficient, and and some you can argue that they're really not delivering what they should to the American public.
Observers like me, I know not the two of you, observers like me, though, saw a little bit of a competition between you and Gundeep Ahluwalia at Labor as the masters of the Technology Modernization Fund. How valuable is a tool like that to a CIO today to help get some things done that maybe otherwise couldn't have gotten done?
Well, the Technology Modernization Fund was instrumental to us. It provided us the financial resources to be able to jumpstart our modernization efforts. Now, granted, you have to pay the money back. It is a fee for that as well. But when you can't get it through the budget process, there was capital available to ensure that you started your journey to modernize your enterprise.
You were at USDA for the last shutdown in 2019. How long do you think it took you to kind of get back to normal where you could start to make gains ahead? What's reasonable for somebody who's just worked through this one to think, okay, it's going to take me X amount of time before I kind of feel normal again?
Well, we felt normal fairly quickly, to be perfectly honest with you. When we got back from the previous shutdown, at that time, Secretary Perdue, we hit the ground running as soon as we got back, and I foresee that happening again. But it's gonna be an even more rapid pace this time.
You're the new Chief Strategy Officer for ACT-IAC. Congratulations on that.
Thank you so much.
What does that role entail? And I imagine I'll be seeing you at ELC in a couple of weeks.
Oh, absolutely. You see me. But the position reports to the CEO, Dave Wintergren. And really, I'll be leading the customer engagement efforts. I'll be a senior leader at the ACT-IAC events. I'll be leading some of the strategy and planning sessions and engaging our government and industry partners as well. And I'll be participating a lot in the innovation activities and in the geospatial activities as well.
It's great to have you back on the show. Congratulations on your
Thank
job.
you so much for having me, Francis. I really appreciate it.
You can read more about reopening government on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. FedGov Today continues in just a moment.
There's always the hype cycle of something new that's going to come and change the industry. And so there's a rush right now to get all of your data, all of your things into the AI tools. But at the same time, the security standards aren't there, or they're moving so fast that they're not putting the security boundaries around them. So a lot of the agencies are actually either putting full blocks on because they don't know how to stop it right now, or they're just letting it go and not realizing kind of what is being put out there. And obviously for some of the agencies, that's extremely risky because they might have the best tech in the world that goes into the AI, and then that AI vendor uses it to train their next model, and now the whole world has that thing.
Welcome back. In today's event spotlight, AFCEA DC's 49th annual Winter Gala is coming to the National Building Museum again next month. It's one of the biggest networking events of the year. More than 1,000 people will be there, including some of the top people from the Pentagon, the national security and intelligence community, and industry. This year's gala is Friday night, December 12th. You can read more about it and register at fedgovtoday.com/events. FedGov Today TV returns next Sunday morning at 10:30. I'm Francis Rose. I'll see you then. Thanks for watching. Have a great week.